Okay, so welcome everyone to Campaigning Together, our get together for everyone interested in fair trade in Scotland. And thank you again for coming along this evening. I'd really like to welcome our new Chief Executive, who's joining us this evening for her first meeting in the post with campaigners. So welcome to Louise.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everyone. Great to see you all. Really pleased to be here and really pleased to be working for Scottish Fair Trade. This is my third week in the post, but it's been brilliant so far. I might have met some of you at the Campaigner conference in September. I spoke at that in my old role, but hopefully we'll meet everyone else over the coming months. And yeah, I moved to Scotland about 3 years ago, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't been very active in Glasgow. So if anyone is from the Glasgow group, keep me posted on what you're up to. But prior to that, I lived in Wales and was very active in the Fair Trade Towns group in Hay-on-Wye. So doing treasurer roles, secretary role, and all those sorts of things. And we did some great campaigning activities and fun events like fashion shows and speaking to schools, dressing up as bananas, and making lots of tea, so much tea. So I'm very happy to help out on tea making duty if anyone needs a hand. But yeah, really looking forward to hearing more about what you've been up to and how we at Scottish Fair Trade can support you. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Louise. So earlier in the year, I sent out a bit of a survey to groups and communities, and thanks again for your feedback. And so this meeting is a chance for us just to consider some of that feedback. If you didn't receive the survey and you would like to be on that mailing list, please email me at catherine.newman@sftf.org.uk. And if you were on the list and you'd rather not be, please also let me know. So the feedback that you shared showed that there's lots going on across the country, and also that there is a need for some physical leaflets, posters, and then regular information, support with social media, new members for your groups, and contacts for other groups. There were two key questions that came out of the survey feedback. One of those was, what's the difference between the Fair Trade Foundation and Scottish Fair Trade? So I'm going to open that question to the floor for someone to answer for us. What's the difference between the Fair Trade Foundation and Scottish Fair Trade? Who would like to give us a hand on that one? Looking for hands up. Anne, would you like to unmute and answer that for us, please?
We're Scottish. But they're more an overall control. They have a control over the actual logo, don't they? Whereas we just work hard to promote fair trade in Scotland.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Fair Trade Foundation is connected with the Fair Trade Mark. So they promote the Fair Trade Fortnight and the Fair Trade Schools, the Fair Trade Communities Scheme, places of worship, etc. And we at Scottish Fair Trade, we support the work of the Fair Trade Foundation and also of the World Fair Trade Organisation, and support Scotland as a fair trade nation. So we're Scotland's fair trade campaign, and we're a network and also a membership organisation. So hopefully that answers that question. And thanks, Anne, for helping out. And the second one was, where should we focus our attention? So that's going to depend on your capacity and your location, your experience, your audiences, and other factors. But we very much hope that in the near future, we'll be spreading some news that you can share with others about Scotland being a fair trade nation and what that means as a fair trade campaigner. And that will give us a bit of a focus. You'll hear a little bit more about that from Louise coming up. But of course, there are the 5 fair trade community action areas, and I'm going to share a link to those in the chat. And those are boosting fair trade, connecting fair trade fair trade change makers, fair trade ambassadors, and fair trade influencers. So those can give you a little bit of focus as well. So let me just see if I can pop this in the chat. Yeah, and then aside from that, there's also the World Fair Trade Organization 10 Principles of Fair Trade, which are always great to share with others as well. So then there were the top challenges that you told us about, and those were the need for leaflets and posters and information, social media support, new group members, and contacts for other groups. So if someone mentions something of interest as we go through this evening, please feel free to share contact details using the chat function. Yeah. Okay, so the programme for this evening is that we're going to move on to a group introduction in a second. That's going to be followed by an update on what's going on with fair trade globally, in the UK and in Scotland from Louise. We're then going to hear from Fair Trade Inverness about what they've been up to and some of their plans. There's time for questions for Fair Trade Inverness, and then there's a chance for us all to ask questions or discuss a few issues, taking us up to 7:10. And then we will close at 7:15. So let me just pop that link in the chat for you to the Fair Trade Foundation's 5 action areas, which could focus some of your attention. So there we go. Okay, so to get us started, if you don't mind opening up the chat function and popping in there the answer to this question. So which village, town, city or place are you joining us from this evening, please? If you're able to pop that in the chat, that would be great. So where are you joining us from? Okay, great, loads of answers coming through. We've got Dundee, Livingston, Dumfries, Cumbernauld, Aberdeen City, Lanark, Linlithgow, Inverness, Glasgow, Kiltarlity, I hope I've said that correctly, near Inverness, Newtonmore, Linlithgow, Inverness, Peterhead and Buchan, Balerno. That's great. Edinburgh, Baldhouse and Break Valley, Coatbridge, Western Bartonshire. Excellent. So I'm hopefully going to make a nice word cloud out of these places that I might share on social media tomorrow, and there's Craig in Western Bartonshire too. So thanks everyone. We've got people from across the country. There's Dunscore coming in. Excellent. You can keep adding those. I'm now going to hand over to Louise.
Thanks. So I'm just going to give a short update about things that are happening around the movement globally and in the UK and here in Scotland. So to start with, the World Fair Trade Organization, WFTO, as you probably know, they're really focusing on challenging economic structures and kind of big picture system change, and using fair trade as a way to talk about the way that business needs to change. So they've been running a campaign called Business Revolution, which we supported through this year, and it's still available on their website. And we'll be promoting their next campaign. We're waiting to find out what that's going to be. But Scottish Fair Trade is a member of the World Fair Trade Organization, so we'll be sharing their content. Their campaigns have been predominantly run through social media or digital, so it might be good for us as a group to think about how we could get some of that sort of system change messaging out to local communities, as well as talking about individual customer choice, but thinking about those big picture issues that we want to challenge as well. Fair Trade Foundation, some of you might have got the hot off the press news last night that Fair Trade Fortnight next year is going to take place from the 22nd of September until the 5th of October, which is slightly later than this year. Hopefully that's better for us here in Scotland. Schools will be been back a bit longer. We haven't heard any news on a theme yet. Until the end of this year, Fair Trade Foundation are still asking us to contact our MPs to ask them to support fair trade. So if you haven't done that already, now could be a really good time, because the new intake of MPs have had a chance to settle in a bit, and these sorts of things might get a better response at this time of year. The National Campaigner Committee, which is part of Fair Trade Foundation, is made up of campaigners from across the UK and has 3 representatives from Scotland, one of whom is our own chair, Charles, who can't be here with us this evening because he's at one of the National Campaigner Committee meetings. So they'll no doubt be talking a bit about what the theme for next year's Fair Trade Fortnight will be, so we can feed back on that when we hear back from Charles. As Catherine mentioned, our reassessment of Scotland's status as a fair trade nation is underway. So as you probably know, the criteria for what it means to be a fair trade nation was revised. So that's really robust and meaningful. So it's looking very positive for us, but we need our independent panel to just confirm that we have met all that criteria. So we are planning for an announcement at the end of February, and we'll have some actions for campaigners about how you can promote that, because it's a really good hook to get people interested and excited about fair trade and how everyone can play their role in maintaining Scotland's status as a fair trade nation. And then the other exciting thing that's happening next year is the International Fair Trade Towns Conference is coming to Scotland. It's going to be hosted in Edinburgh. And Russell from the Edinburgh Fair Trade City Group is on the call. So Russell, I don't know if you're happy just to say a few words just to update everyone on plans for the conference.
Yeah, I think actually probably most people have heard about this from one source or another, but yes, as you said, it's taking place in Edinburgh next year. We're planning it from the 29th to 31st August, and it will take place on the King's Building campus of Edinburgh University. Edinburgh University is also helping us with accommodation at Pollock Halls. The overall theme will be about fair trade and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but we're working a bit more on the detail of that. We'll have a large focus, we hope, and a large contingent of youth, young people coming to the conference, both from Scotland but also internationally. If anybody's interested in attending, we are hoping for a large international presence, but certainly also hoping for a large presence from all over Scotland, really. We still really need to get into the detail of all the program. We've really been working on the funds and all the other administrative stuff up until the present, but we're starting to work that out now, and no doubt you'll be hearing from us one way or another about as things develop.
Great, thanks, Russell. Yeah, it all sounds very exciting. So yeah, I think that's it from me. I can pass back to Catherine.
Okay, so when I read your responses to the survey that I mentioned earlier in the year, there was a little bit of interest in Inverness's particularly work with scouting groups. So, and they've been doing a whole lot more. So we have Fairtrade Inverness here this evening, and I believe Annalise is going to present, and I do have the presentation, so I can share my screen, and Annalise and Hilary, you can give me a nod when you'd like me to flick the slides on. So we're delighted to have you and to hear more about what you've been up to. So let me just share your presentation. Okay, I hope everyone can see that okay. And over to you, Annalise and Hilary.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'll kick off. And for starters, I'm not John. I'm sorry, I didn't get that changed. I'm Hilary. So it's great to be here. It's always wonderful to be part of a bigger fair trade group. And welcome, Louise. Look forward to meeting you sometime. And thanks, Catherine, for arranging this. Well, we're just kind of doing this in 2 parts. Firstly, looking at Inverness Fair Trade, maybe the roller coaster we've been on a little bit, and because I don't mind sharing that. and then leading up to one of our interesting activities, and Annalise is going to talk about that, the session at the Beavers Group and how that went. Is that okay? So, yes, just to say, like many of you, I've been involved for years in fair trade, and I would say for the first decade or so, we became a fair trade city in 2006, and we had a super sort of time. Anything was possible. Scottish government was behind it. The local council supported us, passed the resolution. The co-op was always there to back any activity we were doing. The public was interested, and on we went. However, I suppose leading up to the pandemic, really, we lost 4 or 5 members through various reasons. And, you know, maybe the fair trade message wasn't so front and center. We weren't perhaps too articulate at that point in making the links with climate change. That was a much bigger issue for people. Whereas I'll say now, Fair Trade Foundation have all sorts of resources to support us in that. So we were on a bit of a dive. And then the pandemic came, and then we had to do things remotely, like all of you. But I would say in the last year, we've had a bit of a rejuvenation. Could you turn the slide, maybe, Catherine, or on to the next one? Well, this is, sorry, that's more past history. That's the typical fair trade bazaar we would hold annually. And as well, like many of you, we'd have a fashion show or a wine and cheese or talks with schools. I never, unlike you, Louise, dressed up as a banana, but I'm looking forward to that in future. Okay, next slide, please. So, as I say, about a year ago, and Catherine, I can thank you, because one of the reasons we turned the corner, I really think, was that campaigners conference in Dundee. It was wonderful to go and to realize we weren't alone. We had a small committee. We were all getting a bit older, and so were many others, but we weren't to feel overwhelmed. We were to make alliances where we could and work with those contacts and go forward. So that really helped. But the main thing that changed our position was that we managed to attract 3 or 4 new members, 2 of whom are here tonight, and one of them is Annalise, and she's speaking. So having a critical mass of 7 or 8, 9 committee members made a huge difference. We were also able to attract a Highland Council ambassador, a councillor who now sits on our committee, and that's made a huge difference. We were prompted by Fair Trade Foundation to renew our community status. So I would think, although we were a bit nervous to begin with, it did help focus our minds into the 5 areas and give us a bit of we allowed us to goal set for the next year or so. So that was also very good. In addition, we built new contacts, and one of them's with us tonight, Paul McPherson. He is the member engagement activator for the co-op, and welcome, Paul, to the evening. So new contacts with people. And we also got a bit involved with environmental groups through the Climate Hub. So it took us to, I suppose, build our numbers, regroup, do some forward planning, realize that we could now do face-to-face activities again, and then reach out and make new contacts. So Fair Trade Fortnight, here we are. 2024 was a much more active affair. The poster on the left, the Fair Trade Fortnight one with our logo, was used at the end. It was the end slide at our local theatre. They showed the Fair Trade Climate Change short film after every feature film, which was super. They've done that before, and then we put that on so that they'd know how to contact us. So that worked well. We've lit up the Inverness Bridge for 3 or 4 years, and it's a bit faint there, but you can see it. And as well, we had a letter to the editor as to explaining why we were doing that. And it does look very attractive. It was 3 days. Below that, we were at a harvest fair. And so that was our first step, working with other environmental groups, and we tried to make the case for climate change and the role fair trade could play. And then on the right-hand side, the UHI, the University of Highlands and Islands, which used to be called Inverness College, but they had a freshers fair. And that was an advantage to Fair Trade Fortnight moving to September, because it was the start of the academic session. So we did that, and we've gained a number of new contacts, again, reaching out for new client groups. I should say one other thing that happened over the summer was that my husband and I were very lucky to travel to Malawi, and we managed to have the chance to visit a fair trade tea cooperative. And for me personally, it very much energized me and made me see firsthand the positive impact the premium can have in a community. It was wonderful. So that's for another day to talk about that. But anyway, lots of good reasons why we've turned the corner. We're still, some things work, some things don't, but hey ho, that's it, isn't it? Okay, if we can have the next slide then. So one of the things that Annalise is going to, well, the thing Annalise is going to talk about is our work with the Beavers Group. And I'm just going to let her do that. But before that, just give a few tips that from our experience, and I'm sure I'd love to hear what others have found. Any new initiative, build on your contacts. And Annalise will tell you she had a pal who was a Beavers leader. Great. If anybody has, a church or community or business contact or voluntary group, that's the way to go. And we can't expect to march in and say, well, you need to look at fair trade. I mean, it's important to research, and there is this global issues activity badge really that goes right through Beavers, Cubs, Explorers, and fair trade, we're delighted to say, you probably know this, but it was new to us, is part of it. So we could make the case that we were helpful to them in terms of programming because we would fulfill that requirement to encourage the kids to look at fair trade. Fair Trade Foundation has huge number of resources, as we all know, and we decided, as FOR says, to make it manageable, to focus on bananas. And Annalise will tell you where we went from there. So, and what was great was to work together with her to make this possible. So those are just a few things we learned along the way. And I think I'll just hand over now to Annalise to talk about it.
Thanks, Hilary. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay.
Maybe the next slide, do we want?
Yeah, could we have the next slide, please? Yeah, so just to talk about what we actually did, as Hilary said, we decided that we'd focus on bananas because kids love bananas mostly. We have a blow-up banana, as you could see in all our photos. We use it lots. And so we thought that was a good theme to start with. There was also some really great resources for bananas on the Fair Trade Schools website, including Pablo the banana, who's there at the side there, Pablo the super banana. So this was how we structured. I'll just go through briefly how we structured our talk in case that's useful for people. So we started with, we were talking to beavers and cubs so they're under 10. So we wanted to keep it reasonably sort of simple, but not, but engaging as well. And so we started with where does our food come from? And actually we found the kids were pretty knowledgeable and they were really engaged in this. It is a rural community here. Most of them have a croft or are on a croft or are aware of, growing food and things like that. So it kind of worked for them as well. So we talked about where our food comes from, what we can't grow. We then talked about fun banana facts. We eat 5 billion a year in the UK, a bit about where do bananas come from, that kind of thing. life of a banana farmer, that brought in climate change, and also just getting the kids to think a bit more about what it might be like to be a banana farmer and some of the obstacles that you might have to overcome. And we then used the Pablo film, The Super Banana, which basically gave an overview of being a banana farmer. And that went down really well. Then we moved on to fair trade itself, and it's always sort of difficult to kind of get across the concept of fair trade to fairly small children, I think. But they were pretty engaged in it, and they also were quite familiar with the logo. So that was a pleasant surprise. And obviously we talked about things like fair wages and the premium and things, and they kind of got that. And you know, they like the idea of being fair. And so obviously we talked then about, is fair trade a good idea? And then finished off with how can we support fair trade here in Scotland? Things like buying fair trade, talking about it with our families. It was a really interactive session. The kids got very involved. They had lots of ideas, and they also wanted to answer lots of questions. So overall, it seemed to go well. Can I go on to the next slide? Thank you. So there's some of our keen beavers with our blow up banana at the end. Just sort of at the end, we also, other than taking photos of them with the banana, we also finished off with some warm banana and chocolate parcels, which just something kind of, obviously there were fair trade chocolate, fair trade banana. We'd actually made it in advance. Obviously you need to think about allergies and all that kind of thing, which we had a few, we had to make some changes which we'd done beforehand. And the practicalities of that. But in general, they went down well. We also handed out fair trade stickers. We've got quite a lot of fair trade stickers from various things. And again, as you know, children like stickers, so that was good. And then if we go on to the next slide. Thank you. Just a bit on sort of, I guess, the outcomes rather than feedback. Maybe I should have said outcomes. And some thoughts about things we might do, because we hope that we will go and do this for other Scout groups as well. As I say already, the kids enjoyed the session, and they did already have some awareness of fair trade. And it was it did fulfill part of the Global Issues activity badge, which is good for people like Scouts. Like the leaders were keen to have something to fill an evening, frankly. You know, they like that. But also they want to have a reason for doing it. It's not just us coming in to promote fair trade. And so they liked that link to the badge. It provides something they can then work on afterwards. And just a wee anecdote was that talking to mother afterwards, who said that her child had gone home and emptied all the cupboards at home afterwards and searched for every single fair trade product and why weren't we buying this and that. So it kind of had hit home there. And in terms of thoughts for future, there was just a few things that we thought we could do differently. We might do something like a follow-up activity, or suggest to the Scout group a follow-up activity, and then sort of build more of an ongoing relationship, because obviously the beavers that we saw there, they'll soon become cubs, the cubs will become Scouts, and we'll get a new set of beavers in. So we can do this again in a couple of years to the same group. Obviously we also hope to do some others in Inverness, but it's a sort of evolving thing. And also we might try it. We didn't do a group game this time, just because we had quite a large number of kids, but the leaders weren't averse to us doing a game. So that could be, and you might get a bit more impact about the fairness of being a farmer and all of that. And then you could always obviously do a banana recipe or whatever else it might be, like a smoothie or something like that. because again, it gets them involved and gets them thinking on it, and then they can do it at home as well. We thought about giving them a recipe to do at home, but we kind of run out of time. So so that was us. That was it.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Yeah, and thanks for presenting the challenging period that you had around about COVID, and then now that things have really picked up and well, folk asked for you to present, so it looks amazing. So thank you very much for sharing that with us this evening. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and just if you both don't mind answering any questions that we might have in the group. So if you do have a question, please could you pop your hand up or pop it into the chat for us? That would be great. Looking for some hands up. No questions. So oh, hold on. There we go. How did you get new people to join your working group?
That's the tough one, isn't it? I don't know, for the two new members here tonight, was there a lot of arm twisting and persuasion? I hope not. Oh, do you want to say something, Gus, yourself? You're a new member.
No, no arm twisting was required at all. It's just interesting to hear that reflection that things had nosedived, and then maybe post-pandemic, or just people are a bit more aware again. And
Yeah.
I sort of reflected that maybe I'd become a bit cynical before about how much can we really achieve, and now I'm a bit more persuaded that we have to achieve, and as a group we're better. So maybe people are just more amenable again, maybe. I was.
Did you, Agnes, did you just meet a member of the group? How did that connection?
Yeah, I think well, in Inverness, although we're a bigger town, there's still a sort of community feeling, isn't there? And it's just about, I think what Hilary said, use contacts, I suppose, and Hilary's probably an expert on that one.
And
yeah, so I think it's maybe just keep using contacts. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess following on from that, like that's how I knew Hilary was working with her in another charity, sort of voluntary basis and things, and sort of but yeah, no arm twisting, just yeah, I guess if you've already worked in a voluntary basis on another thing, then you know that that somebody's interested in that kind of area.
Really encouraging to hear that no arm twisting was required. That's excellent. I think this is sort of the biggest question for everyone, really, is how to attract new members to the group. So great to hear you talking about it. There's another question in the chat. What was the film that you showed at the cinema?
I knew someone was going to ask. Do either Annalise or Gus know it? It's the 2 or 3 minute film on climate change. It had to be short.
The Guardians of the Rainforest, the short?
No, it wasn't that one. Annalise, any chance you could look it up? Or I'll tell
Just
you
have a
what,
quick look.
after tonight, I will send it to you. You can put it in the minutes. It's the shortest one, probably, is what we have to say on climate change. It's animated, but it's good, and it gets all the points across in a punchy way. And it seemed to be quite acceptable to people.
What a great idea to get out to wider audiences as well. How did that contact come around with the cinema allowing you to do that?
A former member from the committee, who we'll hope to entice back at some point, she works at Eden Court, again, a contact. So we've been able to use that.
that a GRC and the consequences of that are no more a legal fiction.
Sally's suggesting, was it our own, was it a climate and coffee short film that you showed?
No, it wasn't particularly coffee.
So their rights and protections.
I'll go mute and find it and come right back. You carry on.
Or you can let me know tomorrow and I
Okay.
others know afterwards. Do we have any other questions for Inverness? I guess I have a question about because I know also that the guides have a campaigns badge where fair trade could fit. But I did a wee test on how you would find out if your local community has a guides group, and obviously for, you know, child protection reasons, that's not an easy thing to do. So how did you find your beavers group? Is it just a case of, you know, knowing people that might have kids there and that kind of thing?
Well, I guess it's our local beavers group, so my kids went there and I know the leader through other things as well. And then I know sort of, yeah, so through that I know the other scouts and I know the scout leader sort of who does Inverness. So sort of like you kind of go through that way. But I mean, I think you should be able to search on, like, because if I wanted my kids to go to the Scouts, they're older now, but I think I would just Google the on the Scouts website. You should be able to see who your local group is. I think that should be possible to do.
I'll look up the Scouts. For the guides, you were able to put an inquiry in for your child to join, but you didn't get to find out where the groups were. But so I guess it's about
right.
asking around and that kind of thing.
And how heated the debate can become, especially.
And you've got your hand up. Do you have a question?
No, it's not so much a question. It's just long before COVID, I was asked to give a talk to a guide company on fair trade chocolate because the guides had a chocolate badge.
That sounds like a good plan.
What they didn't in my day, I can assure you of that. But I mean, it's a few years ago, and I don't know if that guide group still exists or not. But it was just they did the church the guides met in. They did fair trade, but the lady who did the fair trade there just wasn't confident to talk about it, and I seem to be the spokesperson in our area. So I wonder why. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, there's no other questions coming in the chat. So Kat has said that one of her group members in Aberdeen City have the HQ at the guides. So she's going to ask them how we get in touch with local groups, so we can feed back on that as well. So yeah, just a really big thank you again to Fair Trade Inverness for sharing everything that you've been up to. I think it's pretty inspiring, especially when you hear about contacting new groups where there are young people. So hopefully that's given others a bit of encouragement and some ideas. So thank you again to Hilary and to Annalise for that.
And thank you for your support, Catherine. I think I've just found the film. I think it's a big long thing, how fair trade is tackling the climate crisis.
Is that
it's on Vimeo, you know, it's on how fair trade is tackling the climate crisis, and it's less than 3 minutes.
Okay, that's great. I will look for that.
It's on the Fair Trade Foundation.
Thank you for doing
website.
I'll share that round. Okay, so our next session this evening is a kind of open floor discussion, question and answer. We've probably got, let's have a look. Yeah, we've got about 25 minutes. So if questions don't go on that long, we'll finish earlier this evening. But please, if you don't mind, either popping a question or discussion point in the chat or popping your hand up so that I can come to you, that would be great. While you think of questions, I would just like to ask for anyone who commented on support needed for social media. It'd just be great to hear a little bit more about what exactly would help you with your social media. So if anyone's willing to let us know, that would be great. Please feel free just to pop your hand up and speak as well. That would be great. Okay, Ian, would you like to come in?
I think part of our problem with it is that although we have a Facebook page, none of our members in the group use Facebook and use social media every day. So it's an added thing, and you've got to think about it, and then you don't quite know what to do. I know the principles. I know you can pick up things from other groups and from Fairtrade Foundation, and you'll copy them on and so on. But frankly, if you're not using it all the time, it's not in the front of your mind, and you tend not to do it. And then you think, well, I don't know how to do it. So we've been trying to kind of get a social media ambassador, if you like.
Apparent failure to meet basic international obligations.
Sorry about that. Sorry, on you going.
So that's the kind of issue we've got, is that it's not something we use regularly, and it's about it being kind of how you do things around here, and it isn't the way we do things. So we need to learn.
Okay, so do you think that if it became like a weekly task and you had some support with what exactly to share, etc., it might be something that you'd be confident enough to do?
It might, and also thinking about what which of the social media. I know there's no one. You should use all the avenues, but as I say, we've only got Facebook. What you hear is that Facebook is kind of passé. It's people who are over, I don't know, 25, 35, 45 use it, and you aren't reaching certain sectors. But these are things we've heard, but we don't know the facts, to be honest.
Yeah, there's definitely younger people tend to prefer Instagram and dread I say TikTok. But Facebook definitely has a place in our community here. So we tend to find that your groups interact much more on Facebook than other platforms, and the photographs of people are of most interest. So when you're out and about, actual real people campaigning tends to be the most sort of popular. But I would be planning, hopefully, with your some further feedback in our follow-up survey to offer some support with social media. So thanks for commenting, Ian, because I can take that into consideration. So I've got a question that's been waiting on the chat for a little while, and then I'll come to hands up and then back to the chat. So Sally is asking how groups engage with businesses. Is there anyone Sally from Dundee Fairtrade Forum, anyone that would be happy to comment on how your group engages with businesses? So I don't think Alison's answering that. She's got a question. Kat, were you waiting with a question?
Hello, yes. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So my question was, we just had a chat at our last group meeting with the new Fairtrade fortnight, because at that point the email hadn't come out, but it's still not quite so popular in our group. So we did wonder whether or not, could we have two, because September's a really busy month. It's like North East Climate Week, Scottish Climate Week, and Fairtrade Fortnight. So there's a lot going on in a really short space, and we've got a couple of big festivals. So we did wonder about looking at what was happening down like the rest of the year, and whether or not we kind of keep our February, March time for schools, and then use the September one for like the community. That was the only thing we could come up with in terms of, 'cause September is so busy. But yeah,
I think that's a
I
good.
just
Yeah, can I
wondered
come
if-
in?
yeah.
Can I come in here? Quite agree with Kat. Our group is not in favour of changing to September either, earlier or later. It just doesn't work for us. We've been running a schools competition, art fair trade competition, for, well, the last 10 years in fair trade, at the earlier fair trade fortnight, which is successful. The schools know when to expect it, they prepare for it. It's not going to help them to change into September one little bit. So we're keeping that as our main event. We have prize giving for the art competition, stalls. It's the big event. The Lord Provost quite often comes to it. So for us, that's a major event. We did have a fair trade stall at the farmers market in September. One of our group works at the One World shop and she could do that, but it was more low key generally, just because it just wasn't working for us. So I know they seem to think it's a good idea, but for not everybody.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you just campaign throughout the year when it suits you. And actually, I think Fair Trade Fortnight looks to be very much focused on digital communications, or at least it was in September there. So I think you just choose a time in the year where it suits you and go for it then. We're here at Scottish Fair Trade, we are thinking about the February, March period. Last year we ran a sort of mini education week, and we're just looking at potential for engaging younger people around about that time, and there'll be more to share on that in due course. Sally, I've not forgotten about you, and I'll come back to that one. Just going to take one from the chat and then back to the hands up. So we've got Alison in Dumfries. She's asking what platforms are best on social media, and yeah, I guess covered that a little bit. So I think Facebook still is really popular with the community that we've got here this evening. Lots of you have got Facebook pages and certainly like and share content that we put up. For younger people, it's Instagram and TikTok. We are planning to move away from X or Twitter within the next couple of weeks, and today opened Blue Sky, a Blue Sky account, which is an alternative to X. But I would say kind of pick one and get it up and running well before spreading yourself too thinly, trying to target lots of different audiences all at once. I think get a following on one of the platforms to start with is probably a good idea. Okay, Alison, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, so my comments were more around just answering some of the questions that have come up rather than a specific question. So with our group, I'm part of the North Lanarkshire Fair Trade Zone steering group, and I work with North Lanarkshire Council. So we find that with the social media, we're using X, which we find actually is quite good with the schools and reaching out to the school community. And I think absolutely with the social media, you can spend such a lot of time on it. So I think it's thinking about which groups are you trying to reach and what groups are you trying to maybe pull in. So with our group, we've got quite a mixed group where we've got various different towns are represented and different people within the community. But, the schools is one of the things that, there's a lot of activity going on there, but it's quite difficult to monitor. So that's one way that we can actually see what's going on locally and link into that. On the business side, I use LinkedIn a lot, and because I'm business facing, that's kind of a natural way to link into the business community. But also the Fairtrade Foundation is very active on that, so you can kind of cut down some of your work because you can actually use what's already been pushed out there, you know, links into films, links into good articles. And rather than having to compose something yourself, you're really just reposting something that's good and of quality, that's coming with the right message and getting that out there. As far as engaging with local businesses, my role is to do that and support businesses. So I kind of tie it in. The Fairtrade story to me sits alongside, as we heard from the Inverness group, how they presented it to the beavers and the cubs. It's exactly the same message for the growing ups. It aligns alongside the climate change agenda, which is really important for our local businesses. And so if you tie it into something else that's of interest to them, it starts to make them look at it another way. The other thing that I work on is the real living wage and equality in the workforce. And I think, again, the Fairtrade story sits very, very neatly alongside that. So if you've got people buying into things because they're a business, because they want to do business in the right way, then actually, you know, thinking about that, and then also linking into your food and drink companies, because you know, often you'll have, you know, we've talked about, you know, the big companies that we know, like the Co-op and you know, Aldi's, Lidl's, Scotmid, you know, they're all great at selling fair trade products. But also you've also got maybe local manufacturers of foods, cafes, restaurants, and we tend to forget about them, but they're also using fair trade products as perhaps, you know, part of their ingredients or part of their supply chain. So it's just another way of looking at it, of trying to get into that. And then on the last point was round the change of the fair trade fortnight. So we engage with schools with that. We did actually last year you know, have a flag raising at the council just to raise awareness. People drive past our building a lot, so having the flag flying during Fairtrade Fortnight just makes people think about it a bit more. And this year we did get one of our local primary schools, but the timing was a bit challenging. Our local college is really heavily engaged in fair trade, but they had just started their new year, so the students are just in the door. So I think, you know, like the other groups, we all maybe need to look at not just limiting things to, you know, the focus on Fair Trade Fortnight, but also looking at when other things during the year maybe sit a little bit easier to coordinate things as well. But some really great feedback tonight, and a really great presentation from Inverness. Really exciting to see how you've been engaging with the local scouts. Thank you for that.
Thank you for your input there, Alison. I've got Russell with his hand up.
Yeah, just to come back to Sally's question about engaging with businesses, a couple of things that we've done is, and maybe that's just because, you know, we're in a bigger city, engaged with the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce. So they broadcast anything we send to them, they'll post on their website and send out to their members. They've got about 1,000 members. So that's a great way of us getting out to people. Also, we've engaged with some of the city councillors because they have great networks, and so they've been able to introduce us to a couple of business groups that I just didn't know about otherwise. And even during, say, Fair Trade Fortnight, getting some materials, and just because I like walking around the city and dropping into cafes, just taking an area, walking along the streets, stopping in at cafes, asking if they could put some materials on their notice boards and most of my little baskets to put flyers out in, asking if they sell fair trade products themselves. But as I just enjoy walking around doing that, so maybe not appeals to everybody.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Russell. And there was a question in the chat just about will there be physical leaflets that you can order? So we designed a leaflet earlier this year. Those of you who joined us at the campaigner conference this year will have seen them, entitled "What's Fair About Fair Trade." So a little bit more aimed at a younger audience perhaps, and maybe an audience that doesn't know so much about fair trade. So our follow-up survey, which is linked in the email that you'll receive to us after this event, asks you a little bit more about your leaflets and poster needs. So it could be that we just do a big printing of those leaflets, and we have an ordering system where you can order them from us and receive those if that's something that's helpful. Paul, you've got your hand up. Paul McPherson.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks very much for organising tonight. I work for the Co-op, along I've got a couple of colleagues on the call tonight from Co-op as well. I'm in Newtonmore, and I've met Hilary up in Inverness, and I'm going to meet her again next week with some other people up there, and I think it's really exciting what they're trying to do in Inverness. A couple of things. I have, and we have in Co-op, 17 of me throughout Scotland and Northern Ireland. And one of the things that I think might be useful going forward for both of us, we will, over the next year, get into 2025 and going forward up to Fair Trade Fortnight, we will be running what we call forums in cities, towns throughout Scotland. And I just wonder, when I saw the places, Cumbernauld, Lanark, Inverness, Linlithgow, Glasgow, or people on the call tonight, it might be a really nice thing to tie up my colleague with the fair trade representative in that town. And then if you've got anything that's going on, you let us know and we let you know, so we can do a lot of things together, which would help each other and get the message out there. We've got contacts with an awful lot of groups throughout the country and in Northern Ireland that, again, I think would benefit from knowing what you're doing, Fair Trade Scotland and Fair Trade Inverness for me, or Fair Trade Lanark, etc. And second to that, we have a team meeting on a Tuesday between 10 and round about 11:30. And I wonder whether or not whether yourself, Catherine, or Louise, or somebody may maybe come along and just tell us what you're doing, plans going into 2025, and maybe how we could. I know the Co-op and Fair Trade go back an awful long time, but it'd be really good to find out maybe what you're doing going into next year, and also talk a wee bit about the event that's happening at Edinburgh University, and maybe how we could potentially work with that. Would that be okay?
Yeah, both of those suggestions are excellent, Paul. It'd be brilliant if you wouldn't mind sending me an email perhaps with all of the contact people, and then I could maybe put that on our website or link to your website, and people can follow up on that. And then secondly, yeah, I think either Louise, myself, or our other colleague Kira would definitely be able to join in your meetings. That sounds like a great idea, and then we can feed back to the group. So no more hands up. I'm just going to say that, let me see, I had Anne is just saying that she reposts material on Facebook from the Fair Trade Foundation and from Scottish Fair Trade and others. So yeah, if ever you're lacking your own content, you can always share from others. And also that she had a spot at the Freshers' Fair in West Lothian, so that's great. And Susan Kelly from the Co-op has said that's a great idea to Paul, so thanks for that. And then we've got, yeah, okay, and so a comment from Kat Ramsey in Aberdeen was that they worked with younger people to create podcasts, websites, online maps. So yeah, I mean, the younger generation are way ahead of all of us when it comes to social media. So if you have any groups who are looking for learning projects, that's absolutely something they could support you with. Any WizKid grandkids or friends, or absolutely tap into that resource, because yeah, they spend their lives on social media, so they're absolutely experts. So Thanks for that comment, Kat. And let me see. Yeah, and there was a co-op rep at your event, and that's great to hear. Okay, Livingston would like to know how you purchase a blow-up Fairtrade banana. I did look on the Fairtrade Foundation's website recently about this one, and there didn't seem to be any for sale at that point. But anyone know? I know you can buy blow-up bananas, but they don't have the Fairtrade mark on them. And
I think they were quite fragile, and they maybe don't do them anymore.
Ah, right.
They burst quite a lot. Put it that way.
Okay.
They developed holes and wouldn't stay up.
Right. Okay. That's a shame. Yeah. And Inverness, you've got the Appealing for Change one. Was that part of a particular campaign that the foundation?
One of our committee members was leaving and gave us a couple of bagfuls of resources, and it just happened to be in it. So I don't know where it came from.
I do know also that Perth and Kinross have got one, so I can actually ask them if they know where theirs came from. But as I said, I do know that you can buy just blank blow up bananas online, and there's maybe some way that you can get the logo put on the material. But let me look into that one and see if I can feed back to you on the bananas. And Alison's commenting that North Lanarkshire Council produced their own Fairtrade posters, which anyone can download and put up during, well, they were used a lot during Fairtrade Fortnight, I know, but at other times of year as well. And Kat has come across some environmentalists and academics who didn't understand the link between climate and Fairtrade. So it might be good to see more awareness and resources with connecting with climate change. The group that had questioned us got a lot of emails, but it has got me thinking if we have enough info. So perhaps something more about the link between Fairtrade and climate change. Would that, Kat, be web links, or is it a leaflet, or what kind of information?
I think a bit of both. So the background came from, I don't know if you guys have heard of Envirolution. It's an environmental festival from Manchester. So they came up to Aberdeen this year to kick it off. So it was an academic that ran it, and honestly he questioned us about, like, why would you want to take part? So it was a little bit gobsmacked. We didn't take part in the end, but I went along and supported Aberdeen for a Fairer World, because I just felt like it was more barriers and he was making it really difficult. But I was just gobsmacked because this is an academic in the environmental community and didn't understand the Fairtrade link, and climate, and producers are working in extreme conditions and climate change and etc. But it just felt like, is there enough information out there, whether it's online or leaflets or posters, or I don't know. I was quite surprised, but at the same time, so I'm in the council, and I just kind of feel like there is this missing gap with climate change and Fairtrade, and I don't know if we need a more obvious connection. I don't know. Has anybody else come across this, or just me?
I'm sure it's definitely something, obviously the Fairtrade Foundation over the last few years has really increased the information they provide about the link between Fairtrade and climate change, and they've had a delegation at COP events. It was a few years ago now, created an animation about Fairtrade and climate change, but it's getting those resources out to wider audiences, and that's something that we we're working at Scottish Fair Trade on our next strategy, and that's part of what we are questioning also at the moment. So I think we just need to keep working and keep spreading what we know with as many audiences as possible to get the message going. But certainly I've made a note of that, because maybe we just need to pick up on that a little bit more in terms of easy to share information with people. There's been some great sharing of contacts and comments in the chat there. So I think the Fair Trade Appealing for Change bananas came out quite a long time ago, but Kat's got an idea about maybe sticking a generic, sticking a Fair Trade sticker to a generic blow up banana. So that is a good idea, and maybe we can think about that. I'll do a little bit of research into bananas, as I said, and share that with you. We've probably got time for one very last, very quick question before we move on, but I think that's been great. I guess actually it'd just be great to have a show of hands for whether you'd like to replicate these meetings in the future on a kind of not too regular but a regular basis, if it would be useful. Yeah, I think that's a yes. That's great. Well, we can certainly do that, and I think it's just lovely to bring us all together to share challenges and good ideas and brainstorm things. So thank you to so many of you for coming along this evening and doing that, and I will set to work on organising the next meeting. So if there's nothing final, if there is, just pop it in the chat, and Annalise has put a comment there about net zero, which is excellent. Thanks for that. Okay, so I mentioned that we'll send you out an email which will come via Ticket Tailor. I'll try to get the link to the short film in that email, and then the other things I'll pick up on afterwards. But that email does give you a list of key dates and reminders, and it's got a link to the feedback survey, and that survey does ask you about leaflets and posters and social media training. So if you've got just a minute or two, it'd be excellent if you were able to fill that in for me. Yeah, also keep a lookout on our social media and on our website. So our website has a link to our social media platforms, and our website is scottishfairtrade.org. And over the next while, we'll be announcing the opening of registration for the International Fair Trade Towns Conference in Edinburgh. So you'll be able to find out how you can register for that. We'll be letting you know about the launch of our refreshed Scottish Fair Trade Awards, which are going to take place in March. We will be announcing also the reassessment of Scotland's Fair Trade Nation status, which is a big one. And also I'll be letting you know by email, follow-up email, when the recording of this session is live for you to share with others in your group who maybe couldn't make it, or for those people who weren't able to join us tonight. Yeah, so a really massive thanks from me to all of you for coming along, and I'm just going to pass over to Louise to wind up.
Thanks, Catherine, and yeah, thanks for your work in organising it. Brilliant to hear from Hilary and Annalise about what's going on in Inverness. That's really inspiring, and good to hear about the kind of things we need to try and give you more support on. So the social media stuff, we can definitely look into that, and good to hear about your thoughts on Fair Trade Fortnight. And I'm pleased that you're finding ways around the challenges of the dates. But again, you know, there are areas that we can try and link in with the Education Week that we're planning. But yeah, really interesting for me to hear about some of the challenges you're facing and how we can support you. And I hope you found it useful. And primarily, hopefully, you've just found it useful to engage with each other and feel that you're campaigning together. And so I think sometimes you can feel like it's just one or two of you in your local area. So it's just good to share some of those challenges and opportunities together. So yeah, look forward to seeing you again at these events and other things. So thanks everyone, and hope you all have a lovely evening.